啦，嗱，大家咧，我哋開會啦，嗱，我哋夠鐘有個法定人數啦，請嗰啲無關嘅人士請。
Well, we have attained a quorum, and it's time to get a start. So, members, please be seated.
你等我講埋會議安排先嗱，大家咧就係我提醒大家嗱，假如委
Let me set out the arrangements. Members, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest in respect of the items under consideration, please disclose the nature of your interest before you speak in accordance with Rule 83A of Rules of Procedure, and please also note Rule 84 in respect of voting when you have a direct pecuniary interest. Now we have item number 1, FCR 2017-18-13. Members are invited to upgrade PWSC 56TR. That is to raise the budget for SILE's major infrastructure work under 56TR from $927 million to $1.2132 billion. And so members requested that this item be voted separately. And we have also had discussed this item in three meetings, and members are reminded that please refrain from repeating questions. Wider policy issues should be raised at panels or subcommittees. And also appeal to members, if they wish to move 37 motions, please submit them as early as possible. We have already received 4 such motions, and I have declared my interest as a non-executive director of Bank of East Asia. Before I give the floor to you, Mr. Wan, this is the meeting of the Finance Committee. If you are unhappy with the way the House Committee was conducted, please use the appropriate forum to express your views. There's a point of order. Although you intervened and taught the House Committee how to act, that's why the anger has been carried forward to this particular meeting. I just want to ask whether we still have 2 hours. We're going to end our meeting at 6:30. So we're not going to have the time extended as in the past practice. I don't think we have done that. I'm afraid that my memory is a bit faulty. But the visit to Liaoning, the carrier Liaoning, will mean that the members will have to depart at 6:45. Mr. Wong Kok Kin, please allow the clerk to speak first. The time for this FC meeting is from 4:30 to 6:30, and the chairman has the discretion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. But the extension is not a result of the fact that we started late. Mr. James Toh, a point of order. How about the one at the back? Who else would like to speak? Mr. James Toh. Chairman, I beg your pardon. I just want to get an answer first. Well, this meeting should have started at 4:30. But according to the circular, this meeting may start late because of the House this meeting would start right immediately after the House Committee has ended. Why did you say that if the Finance Committee could not start at 4:30, by 4:45, it would be aborted?
Somebody asked me for 10 minutes, and I said, well, the consequence of that is, well, she said she'll borrow the most 40 minutes. If we can't have the meeting before 6:45, the Finance Committee meeting will be cancelled. Therefore, I reminded Starry Lee to actually give me the venue in 10 minutes the most. So if we can't call a meeting within 15 minutes after its scheduled time, then the meeting will be cancelled. So maybe I'll ask the secretary to read to you the point of order. I think it's a good chance for us to know more. Maybe members can make reference to 20E of the House Rules, where it says that during the legislative term, House Committee will be held at 2:30 every Friday. If there is a Finance Committee scheduled in the same afternoon, and when necessary, the House Committee meeting will be stopped before the commencement of the House Committee meeting, and it can deal with unfinished business after the Finance Committee is finished. This is something agreed upon by the House Committee and Finance Committee. That is, the Finance Committee needs to meet at regular time slots, considering the fact that officials will be present for the Finance Committee meetings. So therefore, such an arrangement was made before. Usually speaking, House Committee ends at 3 p.m., but if the House Committee expected to finish the meeting late, then the Finance Committee can, because of that, decide on a later time to meet. And the House Committee, of course, would accommodate that. And the Finance Committee will convene as scheduled. Well, but given what's written in the notice, members thought that you would have finished the House Committee first before convening for the Finance Committee. 10 minutes or so doesn't matter, but our expectation is that the most, like 4:30, and then 10 minutes beyond that's the maximum. Starry Lee, initially, when she chaired the House Committee, she would have to think that if she can't finish the House Committee on time, then she would need to meet for the House Committee again after 6:30 or 6:45. But we didn't know if that would be the case. If you had known, because, for example, like Ted Hui, just then, he wanted to have his proposal passed, so he asked others not to speak and to vote instead, and that took 10 minutes. Because we didn't know about your arrangement today, and because of what's written in the notice, we thought that we could keep talking for up to 20-25 minutes. I thought the notice would still be effective. Please look at the notice of the meeting. It stated that the Finance Committee would convene at 4:30 on the same day at room 1 of the electrical complex. It stated very clearly. It didn't say, when any committee would be held after the Finance Committee. The key point is, I've asked this many times. I've asked the secretary before. Over the years, the practice has been that there's a fixed time for Finance Committee, so that officials know when they are expected to come. If we, for example, if the House Committee borrowed 40 minutes from us, say 4:30 to 4:45, then when we convene the Finance Committee, then the House Committee chairman can, after the 2 sessions of this meeting are over, she can reconvene her House Committee. It's up to the chairman of the House Committee to decide whether she wants to reconvene at 6:30. But then she adjourned just then because of order. Lack of order previously. But for Finance Committee, our position is very clear. We meet at 4:30. Maximum delay is 15 minutes, because by then, if it's more than 15 minutes, we'll have to abort the meeting. If we kept dwelling on the chaos, then the Finance Committee would be cancelled. Maybe you didn't want that to happen. You didn't want the committee to be cancelled, right? Who else have questions? If it's the same question, let's not repeat that. Let's go into the agenda. Kwok Ka-ki. And who else? Kwok Ka-ki first. Chairman, right now, under your leadership, sometimes we were actually quite anxious. Previously, you said that Finance Committee must be convened. We need to add meetings to catch up with the backlog or clear the backlog. But by end of June, you all of a sudden canceled 2 meetings to make it for the dinner with President Xi. And then this meeting is supposed to have 2 sessions, and then you cancel 1 session so as to let members to inspect the warship. Are you under too much pressure? If you are over pressure, you might want to appoint a deputy to convene instead. I don't want to see you having heart disease. I think you've not been talking much sense so far. And secondly, Chairman, the way you just spoke, I think you had unnecessarily misled the House Committee. If you had said earlier on that you would allow the Finance Committee... Sorry. Okay, can I finish? Kokaki, I heard what you said about a point of order, right? But it's not your time to speak. I just exercise discretion to give you 1 minute. I know what you're trying to say. Wang Dingguang, I know you just raised your hand. Okay, let me explain. I must respond to Kokaki's point because many members have the same question. Firstly, President Xi celebrating the 20th anniversary of the handover. That was an official ceremony. It's normal for us to skip the meeting to attend that ceremonial function. No problem with that because it only happened once in 20 years. If members would not spend the time there, then I wouldn't apologize for doing that. And why did we cut one session today? It's because Sari Lee expected more time today. She expected House Committee to finish at 4:30. So we were scheduled to meet at 3 p.m. But initially, if we started at 4:30, we would not be able to finish till 8:45. And many members have many activities to attend. So I thought normally we finish the Finance Committee at 7 p.m. So therefore, it's nothing to do with the warship, the Liaoning warship. So the event associated with it happened last night. So don't blame other members. Next one, Nathan Law first. Chairman, just then you said you would extend the meeting the most by 15 minutes. I don't know on what basis did you make that judgment. Is it based on the rules of procedures or what? Or because you knew that the pro-establishment camp need to get on board the warship Liaoning. In the past, House Committee was extended for a long time in the past, and then you call a 2-hour Finance Committee meeting afterwards. That happened. So how did you set the maximum of 15 minutes? So because of your fixation on 15 minutes, Star Lee then had to abort the House Committee meeting and abort the discussion that was going on. Is it because you wanted to let people go to inspect or go on board the warship? Then you cut the time for the Finance Committee or cut the time available to the House Committee. Let me reiterate. Well, if you don't get rid of your imagination, I can't really explain. It was only at 5:30 last night that I was given the invitation. I had no intention. I had never expected to visit the warship. And secondly, your point about the arrangement for the time of this meeting. In 2009, January 16, at that meeting, we decided on the rule. That is the maximum delay of 15 minutes. That was actually set out in the rules procedures. It's not laid down by me. I understand. You have been very keen to ask questions. So I know your question is reasonable, but I think how I dealt with the whole thing is also reasonable. Next one, Wang Dingguang. Just then there was a point of order. Members insulted you in public, saying that you were not talking, that you were talking nonsense. How could you bear with that? You just wanted to make that point, right? Okay. Mr. Wong, honestly, sometimes as a chairman, in order to let the meeting convene smoothly, I just need to turn a deaf ear to what was said. I didn't really hear that he was saying that I was talking nonsense. Alice Mack, Chairman, lots of sour grapes on the floor. As the chairman said, We only received the invitation last night, 5:30, around 5:30 yesterday. I haven't read the invitation, but okay. But when someone said that you were talking nonsense, other people might be just dreaming, imagining about all the time, thinking about the warship all the time. But it's nothing to do with the warship at all. As the chairman said, if we have this meeting till 8 p.m., people from the secretary, it's not good to have them working OT all the time. So I think it's right for you to have only one session of the meeting. So let's ask the other members not to think too much. Chairman, you have very high EQ, but if your EQ is so high, why don't you do more publicity and education? It's like members calling meeting and extending the meeting by how much. These rules are all in the rules and procedures. Can you in point form explain to them the rules and procedures? Well, maybe I need to consider doing a presentation, but at least I would in writing. Okay, consolidate answers to all the questions asked today. So maybe the secretary can prepare a paper. That's a meaningful act, even though we've wasted more than 10 minutes. Okay, let's go into the moving to the agenda. Chu Hua-Tik, first question. You have question, right? If you have questions, please ring the bell. Please don't use my 1 minute first, Chairman. Today, in the paper provided by the administration, particularly the chart in the second last page, I think it really requires much explanation. Can they spend some time explaining? The third column, the government had never explained a financial arrangement in this way. Well, not many in the queue, only Chen Chi-chun in the queue. Now, I'll give you 5 minutes to ask questions. If you just ask them to reply, you need to let them know what your focus is. You can have 5 minutes. But will I have a chance to press the button again afterwards? I'll give you 5 minutes. You can keep asking. I'll give you time again. Okay. Okay, I haven't finished reading the words. I was just looking at Appendix 1. The Appendix 1, I think it's for the first time. Well, this is what we wanted to see when the government approved a contract. I wanted them to show us the fixed price or target cost. And when there's a cost overrun, application for over budget, they need to explain to us the breakdown of how the money is used. Several times we blamed the government and we challenged the government over why, despite the cost overrun, there's a need for $29 million service fee to MTLCL. I spoke loud and clear against the $29 million, but in the chart today, it's not $29 million, but $16 million. $16 million. Because for the price adjustment figure, that is the amount quoted by Edward Yu, the 27 million for items A to I, 16 million altogether are the outstanding amount owed to MTLCL, the on-cost to MTLCL. So my question is, how is it that you could have cheated LegCo for so long? You owed MTLCL $16 million, and yet you wrote in the paper an amount of 29 million. So how come $29 million became $16 million? Let's look at H first. Okay, Ms. Poon, would you answer, please? Thank you. Let me apologize. Can you speak close to the mic? Let me apologize to the LegCo members first for giving you the paper very late. The supplementary paper is in response to the requests for supplementary information by LegCo members at the last committee. Eddie Chu just then said that he is very concerned about Appendix 1 in the paper, and he asked for a breakdown here. So in this paper,
we have explained how we express cost of public works. We talk about the basic cost, the price adjustments, and so on. Because very often a project will take a few years to complete, so we apply for the cost of a public works project. We use a fixed price. As it would last for a number of years, we need to apply a price adjustment factor so as to arrive at the money of the day prices, and that will be exactly the amounts that we pay the contractor for the SILE's project. Most of the project contracts are based on the target cost approach, as we set out in the document. The winners of the contract will be given payments as on the basis of reimbursement, as the project would be completed in a number of years. That we will need also to apply the price adjustment factors. Since this is a target cost approach, the payment is made on in reimbursement basis. So the actual costs are set out in the Annex 1. There are 3 columns. If you refer to PWSC 2016-17 number 44, it's the same as A and B in enclosure 4. We have to report to members on where the additional costs lie. So we use the usual PWSC paper format, and then we use the same format so that you can compare like with like. Therefore, for the first 2 columns, you can compare where the additional costs will be, and then in response to members' requests, we have come up with a 3rd column, and we are talking about the money paid to contractors. It's the same, $1.213 billion in money of the days, in money of the day basis. It's just a question of how we express it. It cannot be put as something that that we are trying to cheat the council. Well, so instead of 60 million, instead of 27 million, it's 60 million. Director, when we read this table, under A, under the column A, the figures, and also the figures in column B are exclusive of inflation adjustment. Column C is the payments in money of the day prices, which would reflect the price adjustment as well, that is to say, inflation adjustment. So we cannot compare A directly with C, and the figures there cannot be compared directly. If we want to compare life with life, we must apportion the price adjustment a cost of $91 million to the various breakdown items in order to make a meaningful comparison. I think we should be allowed more time to ask questions since the supplementary question was submitted so late. I want to ask some questions before I turn to the supplementary paper. It's about the relationship between MTRCL and contractors. Well, government is the client, and MTRCL and John and Lighton and MTRCL holds another company, and Lighton is also responsible for contract 903, which would also be responsible for some of the cost overruns. So MTRCL is managing a project which is run by a business partner. I'm not saying this is not allowed. And then Lighton was purchased by a Chinese enterprise, and it remained a partner. And then another company was taken over by Lighton. And in this contract, John Conan is an employee of MTRCL, but he's also a business partner. He holds 20% in MTL. And CMICM also holds 20% of UGL. So to an extent, it's also a subsidiary of a business partner of MTRCL. So MTRCL engaged a business partner to carry out the contract, and then MTRCL asked the client to pay more. So the government should query whether the MTRCL can fairly manage the project without favoring its own business partners. Some of the items are related here. For example, widening the Wangzhou-Hang Nala is under C. How much of the money involved in the cost overrun related to contract 903, and also the footprint range to LHL, does it come under 904? According to the documents, Lighton should pay all damages resulting from delay to MTRCL, but it should not exceed the 10% of the contract sum. Has this clause been triggered? If not, why not? MTRCL. Lighton Company. Is involved in the tendering exercise. The situation is set out clearly in a project contract, and in different views. The parties may have other relationships in other contracts, and the obligations and responsibilities are set out clearly in the contract. MTRCL has a very sound monitoring system. Any justified claims arising from the project contract and any cost increase will be vetted by our monitoring group. On that group, apart from professionals of MTRCL, the government and its validation expert are also involved. Every claim will have to be assessed by this monitoring group and examined by the government at the same time. Whether it's a MTRCL project or a entrustment project of government, we adopt the same practice. We can ensure that the handling of claims from contractors are fair. You haven't answered the question. Contract 903, 904, and the cost overrun, and how can they be attributed? And also in the contract, the way damages are made. Well, it's in the annex, but although we haven't specified in the enclosure 4, we haven't specified the contract number. Item D and E are part of contract 904. The rest, contract 903. What about the last question? Please switch on Mr. Chen's mic. The total amount of damages payable is 10% of the target cost plus adjustment. In a target cost contract, if there's an overrun, the contractor will have to show the 10% of up to 10% of the contract price. Mr. Chen, it's already over 6 minutes. Please press the button again. Dr. Everdew, 1 minute. Thank you for providing us with this paper. We said we should have breakdown items for damages claim and variations, but I don't see them here. Are you preparing this, or are you not going to prepare the information? I'll ask the director to respond. Please do so when you're ready. Please. The column C in the table is what we are providing in response to Mr. Yu's question on the difference arising from price adjustment. So we have not separated the figures in respect of variations and claims, and that's the way that we express the figures, the difference. Dr. Yu, so are you going to provide the information afterwards, or we can respond to that request of Mr. Yu now, after the meeting? May I remind members, there are only 2 members are asking questions, and many of them have asked questions for more than 5 times. So I would like to invite all members to come back, including Mr. Hui Qifeng, Dr. Lau Xiulai. In many projects where there is all cost overrun, the government will talk about complicated underground utilities or underground rock conditions. I've checked the records of past projects. Apart from SILEs, at the same time, Kwun Tong Extension project also experienced cost overrun to the tune of $75 million. Is similar to $1.9 billion in this case. In 2015-2016, there was an old cost overrun of $75 million, and then suddenly in January they said that they could meet the additional costs. So if this could happen to Kwun Tong Extension, and I would like to know why they could cope with the cost overrun. Can we do the same for SILE's project? Who will take the question? Thank you. Let me first point out that for SIL West and Kwun Tong Extension 9, they were all completed within the approved estimates. There was no cost overrun. I'll ask MTRCL to supplement. When it comes, the cost overrun is the same, but at Ho Man Tin Station is part of the Kwun Tong Extension 9 project. This supplementary provision was used on Ho Man Tin Station. I don't understand. If you did this for Kwun Tong Extension 9, can we do the same for SIL East?
For the South Island Line, for this sort of project, it's different from the Kwun Tong Station. therefore it can only be done as part of the entire package. Well, Chairman, I couldn't quite understand the MTRCL's explanation. Why is it that in the Humanity Station initially there was to be a cost overrun, but then in the end it did not be overrun? But I didn't quite get the reason why. So maybe I'll ask again later on. Yeah, can you use maybe simpler language so we can understand? And there's no need for us to keep asking. Chairman, to the member's question, the over budget item in the paper, it was in relation to the pedestrian facilities in the Kwun station, but the same facilities are included in the Humanity Station budget. And ultimately, with our discussion with the contractor, it turned out that, yes, okay, Director will supplement, right? Yeah. Ms. Lau, just then you were asking that in the Kwun extension, the related infrastructure works were expected to have over budget, but in the end that didn't happen because initially we thought there could be claims involving large amounts. But over time, as we discussed with MTRCL and the contractor, the claims were resolved and the amount was reduced. Therefore, ultimately there was no cost overrun. Okay, Chairman, I didn't mean to challenge them, but what I heard was two different answers. So initially, the MTRCL was saying because the price was included in the Humanity Station, but then the director gave a different answer. It had to do with claims. So to me, they were two different answers. I know I didn't have enough time. So can you give me a proper formal answer to me in writing? Why, despite your initial expectation for a cost overrun, what happened in the end? Okay, we can give you a detailed reply afterwards. So, Ms. Chen, do you want to answer? Yes. I want to supplement here. Just then, Dr. Wong was trying to say that, in response to your question about our progress report submitted to the subcommittee on matters related to the railway, we did say back then the Kwun extension has some cost overruns. But as the director just said, when we actually look at the final sums with the contractor, the amount of claims outstanding were of a lower amount than expected. So therefore, in the end, we managed to finish the project within budget. Okay, but still, please give us a written reply. Chen Chi-chen, 4 minutes. Let me repeat my second question. Based on information in listed companies, the contract stated that because of delay, MTRCL should be given compensation with an amount not exceeding 10% of the total cost. So I'd like to ask, how did you lay down the 10% rule? How did you come to that? And what's that clause in the contract activated? MTRCL, please. Chairman, the condition raised by member was a request for claim made by the company, Leighton, and it was not in the contract. Did it happen? Did this sort of situation or scenario happen? Chairman, as I said before, the contract was totally based on our target price. So if there were actual expenses, then of course we need to cover that, but it would not be adjusted on the basis of the 10%. I didn't quite get it, but let me continue to ask questions. Can you tell me, is it that MTRCL has given or paid Leighton, the contractor, fully? If he has paid up what it owes Leighton, then the outstanding amount now that MTRCL is asking the government for, why do we need to, the government need to pay MTRCL in 3 years by phases the amount? If MTRCL has not paid all the amount due to the contractor, how much more does it have to pay? And also, Leighton and John Holland, well, the two companies are closely related. Can you tell me why? Why does it that MTRCL won't need to pay the companies all the money until 2020? Director? Contract 903. The amounts related to it are not fully paid yet. Reason is there are still outstanding claims. And there hasn't been any final agreement on the amount arising from the claims. We need to give MTRCL time to have continued negotiations with the contractors. I thought in your chart that you gave to me today, the sums have been paid. Why do we have to wait till 2020? Director, I told you just then, why at this stage we do not pay all the amounts. Why does it take so long? I'll ask MTRCL to supplement. MTRCL, please. The facilities concerned in the construction of these facilities, actually most of them are done, but as I said, because we're talking about a target price contract, so we do need to know the actual expenditure first. And say subcontractors, it will take time for them to prepare all the documents related to the actual expenditure for our vetting. So it does take time, for us to go through all the papers. So the government, when you're asking us for the money, so you're asking for an amount that may not end up being used up in the end. Yeah, the money that we're asking for now is with what we think is adequate to pay for the outstanding amount. But of course, if in the end less money is needed, then of course the surplus amount would not be spent or used. Mr. Chen, you have the priority. You want to keep asking? You can have 3 minutes. But would there be a risk that the amount will go up further? We have verified with MTRCL once again, and they told us that the final amount would not exceed what we're asking for now. So chances of the amount going up further are very slim. So based on today's paper, paragraph 8, near the end, it says, because MTRCL cannot during rainy season carry out site investigation during the rainy time, and that would cause a delay in the proof of the contract. But what is the gap between rainy season and dry season? I don't quite get the logic here. Does it mean that even if in the NOLA there's no site investigation, you could tell the soil condition because you hadn't conducted investigation in the NOLA, and now you found some problems which led to over budget. So now are we blaming NOLAs? Is it that for all projects involving NOLAs, then we need to do the site investigation earlier? The contract was approved in 2011, and later that year there are still problems with the NOLAs. What's the gap between a rainy season and a dry season? Is it just 2 months? If we do the investigation 2 months later, there's a big difference in the cost. Why is that? Can you explain? MTRCL. In 2009, we discussed with DSD within the NOLA carry out the site investigation work, and the department answered us that because the flood prevention function of NOLA, if we cause any blockages in the NOLA, it would undermine flood prevention. Therefore, there could be a risk of flooding. So it's nothing to do with rainy season, dry season. The NOLA itself also is affected by tides, rising tides and low tides, because water can get into the NOLA when tides are high. So we need to set up temporary work platform at the NOLA to carry out site investigation. If we set up the work platform during rainy season, that would undermine the flood prevention work. Therefore, we can't do site investigation during rainy season. So in dry season for Hong Kong, it's very short, just a period of 4 to 5 months. Most of the other time in the year could be rainy. So we're talking about actually a gap of 6-7 months in terms of the project. So you decide not to do the investigation during rainy season if you have to wait. So you have to wait for 6 to 7 months till the dry season comes in to do the investigation. Did you make that decision? Please answer. Our arrangement is that we made the final decision in December, January, and then we make arrangement for the installation of a temporary work platform. Then that would be a rainy season. So the next season will come in November. Therefore, if we do it that way, follow that schedule, then that would cause us to delay the tendering process, and consequently a delay in the EPIW, and affecting the commissioning of the South Island line, causing inconvenience to nearby residents. So the government agree with the decision then, the ultimate decision then. Did the government agree, Director? The work concerned was commissioned to MTLCL, so it carried out the work independently. There's no need for them to get approval from the government. But do they have responsibility to discuss with you or get your opinion on, whether to take a chance or not, not waiting for the dry season to come? Would you monitor their decision making? Well, if it's a decision that relates to the construction itself, and for decisions that require or more about professional judgments, technical decisions, then since we've commissioned MTLCL to carry out the work, we would not interfere with them. It's also about responsibility, and the company is not obliged to ask the government for approval. We're trying to help the government here. If MTLCL made a decision and you can now decide whether maybe they have made a wrong decision, if you think that they've made a wrong decision, then you could pay them less. Next one, Alvin Young. For us to be responsible for EPIW, and yet for the returns that MTLCL can retain again from the topside developments at the Wong Chuk Hang stations, it seems like the two things are disconnected. PWSC 138-1617 and bracket 01, which talk about the development about the Wong Chuk Hang station, and in the paper 13802, the administration said that for the convenience of people going to South Island line, it has commissioned MTLCL to carry out basic infrastructure works. So the infrastructure works are to help with the convenience of people going to and out of that station, that line. And there will be a traffic interchange at the Wong Chuk Hang station, public transport interchange, for the convenience of people working, for example, in the industrial buildings nearby. But there will be residential properties above the station in the future.
So all this to facilitate the topside development. How can you say this is not related to the topside development? Can the government please explain why the two are not related? Thank you, Chairman. SILEs, as we set out in the supplementary paper, is an extension of the island line. According to the operating agreement signed with the MTRCL, this is an ownership project. And that is to say the MTRCL has to be responsible for design, construction and operation and financing. At the time, our assessment is that if we look at revenue from fares and other revenue, it would not be sufficient to support the construction and operation of the SILEs. So in order to make it viable, the government decided to provide a subsidy to make up the financing shortfall. So the property rights was granted to make up to bridge the financial gap, and the land so granted will not be more than what is necessary to make up the shortfall, and MTRCL was asked to pay full land premium. The independent consultant estimated that the cost would be $12.4 billion at October 2009 prices. In money of a day base prices is $13 billion. That's the financial arrangement made at that time. As for the infrastructure work for SILEs, I hope members can take a look at enclosure 5 of the PWSC paper on what items are covered. For example, PTI underneath Wong Chuk Hang Station to make it convenient for passengers to use SIL and other modes of public transport. And also there are other items to improve the existing road network in the vicinity of Ocean Park Station and Wong Chuk Hang Station to cope with anticipated traffic growth. So some road widening was and realignment was carried out. I'm sorry, I just want to make one further point. I'll give you a little bit more time. These are government projects. They are different. They're separate from the SILE's project. The two were carried out together just to make sure that the two will be completed in time. So the financial arrangement for the major public infrastructure works are separate from that for SILEs. Mr. Alvin Young. I can only say that the Deputy Secretary has been so responsible that she has read out the entire paragraph in the paper. From the funding scrutiny point of view, if they have a cost overrun, they would get the money back from us, but they also have the right to carry out the topside development, and they would reap a lot of profits. They would gain tens of billions of dollars. So why can't we take the things holistically? If they are able to get more from the property development, why can't they pay for the cost overrun in the project? Well, we are talking about two different projects. The essential public infrastructure works are public works, and they are not part of SILEs. But we are not here talking about the cost overrun in respect of the essential public infrastructure works and not the SILEs. Mr. Leung Chung, paragraph 7 of the paper table today talk about the cost overrun in respect of the ground investigation and the boring. It said that the MTRCL engaged a consultant and professionals to monitor the works. At the same time, the infrastructure works were carried out by contractors. According to the agreement, the MTRCL should exercise the best endeavor to complete the entrustment agreement. And then the government was also monitoring the work of MTRCL. So the government was actually monitoring the MTRCL, and MTRCL was monitoring the work of the contractor. So this is problematic. So the government decided to pay a management fee to the MTRCL to carry out the project and to monitor the progress. So why don't you just engage a contractor directly? If you monitor the work of the MTRCL, you ask the MTRCL to submit progress reports, but the progress reports are not from the MTRCL. Those will be from the MTRCL's contractors. So in terms of the process, the MTRCL will need to, first of all, collect information and assess the information provided by the contractor. And then this is very convoluted. Why didn't the government do the work itself? It would be good if you entrust the project to MTRCL and MTRCL just did the job itself. But now the MTRCL did not actually carry out the actual works. Of course, the cost overrun was not caused by this factor, but you pay MTRCL the big management fee. Was it worth it? Mr. Leung, with regard to the question you have raised, we have actually explained why once in another meeting. Why did we want to entrust the MTRCL, the public infrastructure works to the MTRCL? Because these works and the MTRCL's projects, especially in respect of the stations, there are many interface arrangements necessitated, and we believe it would be most effective if they are entrusted to the MTRCL. And this entrustment arrangement is adopted for all the entrustment projects at different stages. We would monitor the work of the MTRCL to see if the works have been carried out in a professional manner and whether the works have been completed in a professional manner. So the question is, the MTRCL did not carry out the contract. The main parts of the works were not completed by the MTRCL. You just give me a very roundabout answer. Why are these works related to MTRCL project? You are monitoring the MTRCL, but the works were carried out by some other contractors, and MTRCL was only tasked to monitor those contractors. So this is not a very effective monitoring mechanism. And on top, you have to pay MTRCL a management fee. Even for works carried out by the government, if we're talking about major works, we would also engage consultancy firms to manage the works, and the actual construction would also be outsourced to contractors. So in terms of arrangement, it would be the same as it's the same approach as the one adopted by the MTRCL. And we would entrust the works to the MTRCL through an entrustment agreement, and the government acts as the monitor to make sure that the MTRCL would carry out the project in a professional manner. And that is to say, that's exactly the approach adopted. Ms. Claudia Mo. I'm surprised that this is the same as the approach if you were to engage a consultancy firm to do it. We know MTRCL enjoys a special status. You can say it's a hybrid. It's a listed listed company. It's 75% owned by the government, and it's an indispensable mode of public transport to many people. It's very special. It enjoys a monopoly in that niche market. And you are saying that the MTRCL is very much like another consultancy firm. I disagree. I disagree with you 100%. Would you agree that this comparison is actually not appropriate? Well, I was saying that in the implementation of works projects, whether we are talking about the MTRCL or the government, the same approach will be adopted. The question is, the difference is that when we entrusted the project to the works to the MTRCL, we would be monitoring the MTRCL. So, Chairman, you have heard that the government claimed to have monitored the work of MTRCL. I'm not going to be philosophical about this. I'm not familiar with works. There is a price adjustment in the contract, and there's a reference to force majeure, something you cannot resist. I think it has to do with natural disasters, etc. Apart from an act of God, fire, and so on and so forth. What about geological conditions, complicated underground utilities? Would these also count? Who would take this question? Force majeure is an act of God, something you cannot prevent. It has got nothing to do with the geological condition. What about underground utilities, pipes, and so on? Those will not be covered if there's a claim under force majeure. And let's say the SILEs is divided into 10 parts. In terms of liability, will you say that how would you apportion the liability in a simplistic way for easier understanding? Would you say that the government is responsible for 4 and you 6, or 3 on government and 7 on MTRCL? Deputy Secretary? Ms. Mo, are you talking about the essential public infrastructure works? Yes, in respect of SILEs. As I've said, this is a government project. All costs are to be borne by the government, and that's why we need to get funding approval from this council before we can carry out the necessary infrastructure works. At that time, there were many rounds of consultation with local people and the district council before we come up with this program of public infrastructure work, so that when SIL is commissioned, such an infrastructure would make it convenient for passengers. But is the topside development given or 100% owned by the MTRCL? As I've said, this SIL project is an ownership project. Under this approach, the MTRCL would do the financing, design, and construction. We know that there is a cost overrun for SIL East, $3.4 billion, or 25% of the original estimate. The overrun was borne by the MTRCL and not by the government.
主席，
Senator Chung, Chairman, on the property ownership right and the construction of the South Island Line under the ownership mode, this additional funding of 200 odd million, well, is of course about the South Island Line East, including facilities for the pedestrians, public transport, making it easier for people to walk to the station. In the paper, where it says this is a ownership project, so MTRCL should bear the risks, but because the fees and returns revenues from other non-fees items cannot support the construction costs, therefore the government is providing subsidy to MTRCL. And the calculation method for the shortfall is that footnote 1 on page 13 of the paper, MTRCL, the weighted cost is given there. The weighted average capital cost, what is it and how many percent has been added to it? Okay, just then we mentioned that the South Island Line East, just by looking at its returns and expenditures, well, it's not financially feasible because cost-wise it includes the construction of the rail and the purchase of the train compartments. Please directly answer my question. You don't need to repeat what I just said. I actually answered very clearly. The weighted average capital cost, what is it? And you said 1 to 3% of possible increase. So what is the actual increase? Well, here in LegCo, when you ask questions here, we follow the rule of 5, 3, 3, 2, 1. So if you want to finish this item earlier, please answer in the way that you would expect if you were the LegCo member, the official to answer. The weighted average capital cost is the amount that the company needs to pay for a capital project. Ask MTRCL to supplement. Chairman, Mr. Jones' question. Sorry, we don't have the information right now because this is related to the principal railway project, so it's not really related to today's item. But I can give you the information after the meeting. But this is included in the paper. It's mentioned in the paper table today. I was reading from it. So can you give us the answer ASAP? My other question is, the financing model. The government, well, the MTRCL will have the property development right, and but it will still need to pay the government the land value. It's estimated that the value of the land would not take into consideration factor of the existence of the rail station. So that means that the value of the land to be assessed would be sharply decreased because there wouldn't be any public infrastructure works, footbridges, public transport interchange, bus stations, and so forth. Because if the entire South Island Line does not exist, then the land value would be greatly depreciated. So in footnote 2, your calculation there, how is it different? What's the gap between, the estimate for a situation where the line does not exist? I think our calculation did not take into our calculation of the value of the land did not take into consideration the presence of the rail, because we need to pay for a shortfall to help MTLCL go ahead with the entire project. So the total expenditure, of course, would be much higher than originally expected. And that is, if the returns or profits cannot meet the cost, then, in other words, if there's a shortfall, probably the South Island Line East, the scale of the topside development above the station would have to be increased to pay for the shortfall. I was asking her about the gap, but then she was talking about another thing. I was just asking you about the gap. Sorry, I don't have the information. Thank you, Chairman. If not, then can you give us the information afterwards? That is the difference in the value of the land. Okay, between a scenario where there's the line and where there isn't the line, South Island Line. Well, I think land value is confidential information, and now we're just in phase 1 of the development. We still have various phases of development at the site, so I'm sorry I can't review the information to you. But this is about what the DS just said. If there's no payment, or if we can't cover the gap, the shortfall in the expenditure and returns, then the government, of course, will have to support the company. Well, this affects actually this has cost implications, of course. But our item today is about the financial arrangement for the South Island Line EPIW. So our item is really not related to what Mr. Van just asked for. Lao Silai, well, Chen Chi-Chun just asked a question, and this is a follow-up. I just heard from the administration, Mr. Leung, that why didn't the government do the construction? Why did it outsource it to MTLCL? And the government said that you're responsible for monitoring, and MTLCL is responsible for pushing forward the project. But Chan Chi-Chun, in his question to you, we found that part of the cost overrun was due to inadequate or rough site investigation. Because you didn't do the site investigation, you skipped the site investigation in NOLA during a rainy season. So did you discuss with MTLCL? And the government said that, well, this is the MTLCL's responsibility, so it didn't really monitor their work. So I found it strange. If this is the MTLCL's decision to take a risk and not go ahead with the site investigation, which resulted in the cost overrun, so why is the MTLCL not shouldering the responsibility for the cost overrun? You just then said that this is their responsibility to carry out the site inspection. If you were responsible for approving and you decide to take a risk yourself, so shouldn't it mean that someone in the government department have failed to closely monitor the project? Well, as for who's responsible, I think we need to look at it from two aspects. The engineering project, we commission it to the MTLCL, which then is responsible for taking forward the project, and it has to be responsible for its decisions made. But if there are other decisions required, and if the government interferes in it, then in the long run, the government will need to share the responsibility with the company. So therefore, in this sort of situation, we will let the MTLCL to make decisions that they should be accountable for. But when a decision is made, decisions which would change arrangements stipulated in the contract, or which would have or cause the governments to incur more expenditures, then the MTLCL will be obliged to inform the government, and the government will give it advice. If in the end the company makes a wrong decision or does not make a decision in a professional manner to the extent that the government suffer losses, then the government can hold MTLCL responsible. So would you hold the company responsible that because of the lack of site investigations, the project now go over budget? So shouldn't you then hold the company responsible? If in the process of taking forward the project, MTLCL fail to meet the requirements in the entrustment contract, then of course we would chase them for any additional expenditure or losses incurred. My question was very clear. All along we were discussing what caused the overrun, and they said that is due to the lack of or inadequate site investigations, and they didn't tell you about what they do with the site investigation. And so in the future, would you hold the MTLCL accountable in the future? In the future, we will look at the whole picture and see during implementing the project if there were any scenarios where MTLCL failed to meet the requirements in our entrustment agreement. If there are such scenarios, then if there are any decisions that cause the government to suffer losses, we would chase the company for compensation. Okay, just on page 8 of the paper, Highways Department said that through the monthly progress report and meetings, their staff also went to the sites for oversight, and they had close liaisons with the MTLCL team, and if necessary, they will ask the company for additional information. So in your contact with the MTLCL's engineering teams, does it include outsourced engineers? Because just now we heard that all the design, monitoring, and other works were outsourced by MTLCL. So who did you have close contacts with? And also, you said that the government commissioned MTLCL to do the work, and based on the entrustment agreement, the MTLCL is required to comply with professional engineering standards to do their design and related works. So for the professional engineering standards or the engineers concerned, had they asked that site investigations be done, did MTLCL really fulfill the requirements in the entrustment agreement? So when you're asking that when we monitor the company, would we contact people, contractors outsourced by the MTLCL to do the work or to do the monitoring work? We won't, because we are monitoring the MTLCL's work. Therefore, our target of monitoring is MTLCL. And to monitor contractors' performance, that's the MTLCL's responsibility. We do go to the site for on-site inspection periodically. But even though we are on-site, when to see how the project is being done, we would not have direct contacts with the contractors.
We won't give any directions, for example. You have wasted a lot of time. In the entrustment agreement, is stipulated the MTRCL should carry out the design and the works in accordance with reasonable expectations from professional engineers. Director, in the project, a number of decisions would have to be made, which will affect the payment from us, including the variation of design. So far, we are not aware of anything that the MTRCL has done which is not in accordance with the entrustment agreement. But in the future, this will be subject to a follow-up review to see if they have done anything not in accordance with the entrustment agreement. What about the ground investigation and boring required by the engineers? Did the MTRCL do it? As I've said, the MTRCL would have to manage its own contractors and consultants. So I would like to defer to MTRCL for this one. We acted in accordance with the geo guide from the GEO. On both sides of the Nana, we bored some holes, exceeding the number required under the geo guide, and also make reference to existing ground investigation reports. Although we did not find any boulders, the distribution of boulders was very irregular. It would be very difficult to predict. Even if we have more boreholes, we might not be able to predict where the boulders and cornerstones were located. Please switch on the mic of Mr. Leung Yu Chung. I'm not talking about the quantities, the number. According to entrustment agreement, MTRCL had to act in accordance with reasonable expectations of engineers. I'm not talking about the number of boreholes, but did the MTRCL do what the engineers required? I think the question is about whether the government monitor them to see if they have acted professionally. But you are saying that the number of boreholes would not be helpful. Even if we have more boreholes, we might still not be able to correctly, accurately predict where the boulders and cornerstones were. I think they are saying that they have met the expectations. But there were certain expectations of professional engineers. Did you do what the engineers expected? As I've said, as at this moment, up to now, we have not found out anything which is not done in accordance with the entrustment agreement by MTRCL. In other words, they have been doing things reasonably expected of by professional engineers. I want to ask a follow-up question about multiple subsidy. We gave them the land, we gave them the topside development rights, and also the big discount in land premium, and for public infrastructure works that were carried out. It was for the purpose of bringing passengers to MTRCL's stations. In your paper, contingency fee is provided to to meet unexpected expenditure and an unforeseen underground conditions. And now you want to get $200 million additionally, mainly because of unfavorable ground conditions, but that's already provided for under contingencies. So you are spending the money under contingencies, and then you ask for more. Please, you said there were two problems. There were the restraints posed by underground investigation and also by complicated underground utilities. Well, we're not new to this job. What are we talking about? Footbridge, PTI, pedestrian network. This is not the first time we do this. And as for underground utilities, you now claim that you were not clear about them. Is it that we are going to encounter the same problems for every project? Unfavorable ground conditions, complicated underground utilities, and every time you come back to ask us to pay for cost overruns. So if let's ignore the multiple subsidies for the time being. Well, $160 million is the 30% of administration fee. Isn't really too generous? Are we not being over generous? We provide them one subsidy after another, and they incur cost overrun time and again. They have to explain why you're blaming unfavorable ground conditions. Didn't you factor that in contingencies? Well, we did have an estimate for contingencies before the commencement of the project. We would usually base the calculation on the projected risk, and we would come up with an amount. When this amount is insufficient to meet the actual costs, the actual situation, then therefore we need to get more, and that's why we're here, because the original contingent amount for contingencies is insufficient. But you are asking for $200 million additionally. How much is that in relation to the cost of the project? And it said that you are going to have a geo guide for the entire territory. And secondly, how can you do a better job in dealing with underground utilities? Do you have any plan to handle underground utilities? If we look at the problems encountered by MTRCL, well, actually, we are talking about rather old underground utilities, information for which is not as complete. That's the reality. Starting from 2014, we have introduced the excavation permit system. Utility companies are now required to keep better records of their underground facilities and their pipes. We believe that this problem would become less serious. Mr. Leung Chung, when we talk about whether the works was carried out to the expectation of professional engineer. But this is in the paper. The MTRCL did try to find from utility companies the record of underground utilities within the site area, and those utility companies did try to ascertain the information through trial changes and pitches. However, there were the restraints posed by the roles, working timetable. So there were some constraints to the use of trial changes and pits. So it could not be done because of road traffic situation. According to an entrustment agreement, the MTRCL is required to carry out the design and the construction in accordance with expectations of professional engineers. But then you are saying that it could not be done. And then you also said it was completed. Are you not contradicting yourself? Mr. Leung has referred to the constraints, which are objective constraints. Any professional engineer responsible for the works would have to face the same restraints or constraints. And because of these constraints, they were not able to carry out more investigation. So if we talk about the reasonable expectation of an engineer, I would say that any engineer would face the same constraints. I'm talking about what the expectations of what are the reasonable expectation of an engineer in that situation. But you are saying that things could not be done because of the site constraints. Would an engineer reasonably expect that such things should be done? Well, we expect a professional engineer to come up with some judgment. The judgment must be made professionally. It doesn't mean that the engineer would have to remove or eliminate all the constraints. In other words, the MTRCL did something superfluous. The MTRCL asked the utility companies to give them records. Are you saying that it was superfluous? Well, they should have done that. They should. Mr. Leung, for the third round, please continue. Well, the relevant persons will need to understand how or know how the underground utilities are situated. So the first thing to do is to ask for records from utility companies. And then the records have to be verified for accuracy. So they would carry out some trial pits or trenches on the site. But it's not really digging up everything. So the trial pits would only be able to tell you the underground utilities covered by that pits. If when they dig up the road and things are rather different from what they can tell from the trial pits, then this is not really avoidable. I just want to know what the criteria on which the engineer would reasonably expect something to be done, and then we can know that whether the things that should be reasonably expected were carry out or not carry out. For the government, we monitor the MTRCL. We would refer to the entrustment agreement to tell whether the MTRC has done its job in implementing the works, and the MTRCL is responsible for monitoring its contractors and consultants so that they can see to it that the required works have been carried out. As when we monitored the work of the MTRCL up to this point, we are of the view that there's nothing which has not been carried out in accordance with the entrustment agreement. As regards consultancy firms or contractors commissioned by the MTRCL, then it's the duty for the MTRCL to monitor the work of these contractors or consultants. Mr. Tanya Chan, well, I've waited for more than an hour. Please give me back a few seconds.
Well, Justin Fernando Chung was talking about the subsidy. I can't recall which paper where it says that from the signing of the agreement, the financial risks are shouldered wholly by the MTRCL. To the land and the development right, and the land price does not exclude development of the rail line. Well, a few years ago, people at South Horizon knew that there would be an MTR extension, and the price, you could foresee how high it would go up. So now, are you saying that, well, what the paper said is that the MTRCL, since it's listed in the 10-year period, since then, there hasn't been any other method to promote the property developments about rail lines. I want to ask about your calculation of land value. Who came up with the calculation method? Have you thought about reviewing it? I mean, this sort of calculation would give MTRCL a huge fortune. 4 months ago, they sold the first phase of hundreds of flats in the area out of a total of 4,700. It's heard that the winning construction consortium paid $6 billion, more than $6 billion, and is expected in the future the completed flat will be sold at $30,000 per square foot. Well, Chairman, let me give you papers of District Council 2008 March 8th Southern District Council meeting, where members asked why the footbridges not connected to the properties near Wong Chuk Hang Station. Ocean Court, all those residential properties behind the Wong Chuk Hang Station. So but this would bring a lot of income to actually the developer. So how did they came to deciding on the land value? Well, thank you. When we estimated the value of the land, not taking into consideration the rail development, the purpose was to make sure that the company can have adequate income to make up for the shortfall in its expenditure for the construction of the rail line. And let me supplement that this EPIW, besides building pedestrian facilities and footbridges, it also includes neighborhood improvement measures and other facilities. So the government thought that this is a government project, therefore we need to be responsible for its costs. And it's really not related to, it's separate from the overall development of the South Island line. Caldemo, 4 minutes. Sorry, I haven't really followed this item closely, but I found it strange that now you are requesting an additional funding of $286 million, of which $130 million are intended for price adjustment factors and to pay for the cost to MTLCL. That's a huge sum. I don't quite get it. Why? And at the end, you said that there used to be a requirement for $340 million, but because item G was based on money of the day price, there was a saving of $56 million, so now it came to $200 million. I'm quite confused. What sorts of figures are they? I don't quite get it. That's why, for the second time, only now do I dare to ask. What are they? Who can explain? Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Mo asked about paragraph 14. Item D, E, and G. For D, in the paper enclosure 3, we did provide a chart explaining the $136 million shortfall in enclosure in Table 2. Table 2, well, can you explain to me then? I don't quite get what you're saying. Which enclosure? I didn't get it. Table 2, where is it? So many papers, for this item. There's so many. I'm going crazy. And then you sort of try to assume that I should have been able to find it. You need to show the audience. There are family audience who don't have the papers with them. That you need to make sure that they can follow. Sorry, I'm not thinking well. I have taken some medications, so I'm quite uptight today. Table 2 in enclosure 3, actually at the previous meeting we explained it last time, but I can do that again, explain again. Table 2, up to March 2016, you saw a figure here that's been paid already. And below it, on the price adjustments for several years, our estimates. They are our estimates based on our indicators. And the result is that the price adjustment requires an additional provision of $136 million. For item E, $29.1 million. That's due to the additional work now required, which will increase the overall cost. And according to the entrustment agreement, we need to pay them some management fee. So this is a provision of on-cost as required by the agreement. Tanya Chen, 1 minute. Chairman, I'd like to ask about what is the risk for MTLCL? The paragraph I just read, financial risk after the agreement was signed will be borne entirely by the MTLCL. I don't understand if they have cost overruns, they come to LegCo for money, and the properties I just mentioned, just the hundreds of them sold. The properties above the Wangzhouhan station, well, there are supposed to be 800 flats, but now there are 800 flats. In the future, there will be 4,700 flats, and that would mean an income of billions of dollars. Why are they asking us for $286 million? It's just a small sum in the context of what the huge fortune that they're going to have some years down the road. So what is the risk? Is the risk coming to LegCo to answer our questions? I don't see what risk they have. And also, in the table you just mentioned, well, in the map in your other enclosure as well. So in 2008, Southern District Council members actually asked questions about the connectivity. the South Island Line East, because it's an ownership project, as I just said, the cost of the construction have go beyond budget by $3.4 billion. So 25% of its original estimate. And because it's an ownership project, the government need not shoulder the additional cost. But after being given the right to have property development, MTRCL will have to bear the risk of fluctuations in the property market. But no matter what, the South Island Line East project is really a separate item from the EPIW item that we are asking for additional funding today, because the Southern Island Line area and around the area we have this EPIW, which are actually community projects and which are government projects after all. So we have to get additional funding. Eddie Chu, well, Director, paper cannot contain fire. Just then you told me that in enclosure 1, Annex 1, item A cannot be deducted from C, item C. So let me ask you, all along I've been saying that you said MTRCL will charge an additional $29 million. You did not challenge me on that. So now look at A. Look at A. $91 million. Please tell the public, MTRCL has said actually really got more. How much? How much besides or beyond $29 million? Mr. Chu, the number you want, we haven't got the figure yet, but we can work it out. We can provide that for you after the meeting. Thank you. Next one, go home 1 minute. Chairman, well, just 1 minute. Even I were to become powder, I would still embrace you with ashes. Not you. I was referring to what the dialogue between Liu Xia and Liu Xiaobo. The whole world was watching how Lechko, you know, today is the commemoration 80th anniversary of the Japanese invasion of China. Did Liu Xiaobo kill your family? Why can't we talk about him in our meeting? I think it's shameful what Story Lee had done. It's really shameful to Lechko. If you never to become powders, I will embrace you with ashes. That's what the Liu couple was saying. Who are the communists? Don't say this is not related to the communists, because it's the communist consortiums that were given the projects. I think this Lechko is really cold-blooded and corrupt. Albert, you? I would suggest that the administration withdraw the paper table today, because it's really seriously untrue. If you cannot explain clearly, why don't you, if you can provide this ground basis support for your claim that you're giving $29 million to MTRCL as on cost to them, either you admit that your paper on May 26th is wrong. If not, then you must withdraw today's paper, because there's discrepancy there. Who would answer? Chairman, I think after the meeting I will follow up on the question just raised. Well, I don't think we have a vote today, so maybe before we have the meeting next time, the administration can discuss with members. If members always accuse you of creating false papers, that would not be good for your image. And I don't see why members always make such kind of accusations. I hope you can clarify it yourself. I don't want to see the same accusations being leveled at you next time. Well, anyway, time's up, and I think we need to adjourn now.